Hello and welcome to a conversation on the Daily Bern. I'm your host, Eric Miller. I'm joined today by a tremendous progressive from the great state of Texas, Julie Oliver. How you doing, Julie?
I am healthy and well, and thank you for having me. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you for taking some time to chat with me, and thank you for running and running again. I want to talk about, you ran in 2018. I want to talk about your district, what you're fighting for, who you're fighting against, how the party is helping you, if at all that kind of stuff. So your race is in Texas 25th district. You did run in 2018 and got really close. Like you closed, I think, like a 20-point gap. Can you talk about that race, and then how you're carrying that momentum into 2020 here now?
Yeah, of course. So 2018, I ran because a couple of reasons, but the biggest reason is I have a son who has a lot of healthcare conditions. He was born in neonatal intensive care. We discovered he had a heart condition at the age of 5 that he sees a cardiologist for annually. And then in high school, probably the most serious thing is we learned he had an immune deficiency. And as we navigated, 7 different specialists and tests and surgeries to figure out what was wrong with him. I mean, he missed almost 2 years of high school. So he'd go for as long as he could, get really tired, very fatigued, get really sick, and then he'd be home for months. And we'd have to have a special teacher who would come to our house, give him, quizzes and tests and pick up homework, take it back to school. And that was probably the biggest challenge that our family has ever faced. And in 2018, not 2018, it was 2017. I vividly remember it. It was July. The Republican Congress had just voted to repeal the Affordable Care Act. I know it's not perfect, but it has one very important component, and it is the protection of pre-existing conditions for folks like my son. And so I looked at my husband, I said, I have a crazy idea and I need you to talk me out of it. And we talked about it for probably over a month before I finally decided to step. And I kept trying to talk myself out of it. But you sometimes do for your kids that which you wouldn't even do for yourself. And I left a career, completely coincidental, a career in healthcare finance, a 15-year-long career in healthcare finance. And I always tell people, what better way to disrupt the system than to know it from the inside out and be able to smash every argument against Medicare for all. I love questions like, how are you going to pay for it? That's like my favorite question to answer. So it was really out of necessity for my son. And so nobody looked at this district as competitive. It was held by a Republican fundraiser. He was a great fundraiser for President Bush and Governor Rick Perry. And so he was gifted basically this seat. And it was always over a 20-point margin. We shaved 12 percentage points off that to just over 8 percentage points to go. And I know we're going to do it this year. I absolutely have every confidence that we will send him back into the northern part of Texas, outside of our district, Weatherford, Texas, come November.
Right on. Yeah, I heard you in another interview where you mentioned, he doesn't live in the district.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't. Yeah. And in fact, this district was intentionally drawn for him. He was Secretary of State. In Texas, Secretary of State has a seat on the redistricting commission. So when they're redrawing congressional lines every 10 years after a census, he had this seat drawn for him, and he sat on the redistricting commission that blessed it. So no, he didn't want to do a primary challenge to the Republican incumbent where he lives. And he was given a stretch of 200-mile district, thinking that nobody would ever travel the length of it several times over. I put 50,000 miles on my car traveling this district in 2018. And it shows, because when you show up on somebody's porch and you're talking with them, you can actually change hearts and minds. You can't do that on TV, but you can do it on somebody's porch.
Yeah. There's a lot that you mentioned in there, and I want to hit on a bunch of that. But since you called it out, what is your best answer for how do you pay for it? And I would never ask that question.
Yeah.
But you prompted it. So
I love that. I love that question. I start with this. We already do.
Right.
We have universal health care in America. It is called the emergency room. But what happens when folks don't have insurance and they can't get chronic conditions managed or preventive care to even prevent the onset of a chronic condition, they eventually will end up in our emergency room. And the cost of treatment in an emergency room is a multiple of cost. I tell people, if you end up with hypertension that is unchecked and you're not taking your medications, you're not being seen by a cardiologist, and you go into cardiac arrest that requires surgery, your first bill from the hospital will be about $250,000. Your second bill will probably be twice that. You probably won't make it back the third time to the ER. And think about how many times somebody could have seen a cardiologist for $250,000 to $750,000.
Yeah, it's obscene.
Yeah, it's obscene. So we already pay for it. Let's do it in a smarter way that actually saves lives and improves outcomes.
Yeah, right on. And yeah, it's good to know that you come from that background of finance. So plus you're an attorney, right? So there's a lot of dots for you sort of on your resume to connect for your advocacy here. So it's great. You mentioned about driving around the district and stuff. Being that we're in quarantine, coronavirus pandemic, what is the state of the campaign as far as outreach and grassroots efforts?
Well, I will say we're not knocking on doors. We want to be respectful of what we are living with, and we certainly don't want to inflict any fear by stepping onto somebody's porch and knocking on the door. But I will say the thing that this is presented is an opportunity, and it is an opportunity to check in with our neighbors throughout this district just to see how they're doing. We made a decision immediately after we started sheltering in place, and it was roughly about the same time as spring break here in Texas, that we would start making calls and just doing well checks, and however we could provide assistance to the folks in our district, we would do that. We have an absentee congressman who is not interested at all in helping the constituents of our district. So we took that on ourselves. And whether it's been having groceries delivered to somebody's home, or several times we've done that, or I kid you not, chicken feed delivered to a little rural town to somebody a senior citizen who had chickens and she couldn't get out. Prescription drugs, helping people navigate the Texas Workforce Commission, which has been an utter nightmare here in Texas for people who are trying to file for unemployment. We are really trying to do whatever we can to help people where they are. And I don't think we would have done that. We probably would have been doing the typical campaigning as telling people about me and can we earn your support. So this is far more meaningful because we know we're actually making an impact in people's lives.
Wow, that's amazing. And that, that speaks volumes. I want to pull up the district here in a minute. That speaks volumes of your motivation, right? So, your motivation is public service, is justice, versus Roger Williams, who's worth $30 million, doesn't live in the district, does self-dealing, has ethics violations, and we'll talk more about that. So, I'm sure that resonates with voters when you reach out to them. Yeah. Yeah, I want to look at the district a little bit because it is gerrymandered, like you said, quite ridiculously, right? And part of that is deliberately, to misinform voters, right? To keep the constituents confused, probably, right?
Mm-hmm.
And pick the voters and all that stuff, right? So I like to share the district just to point out, what is within it, right? So, and correct me if I got anything wrong here. Fort Hood, Hamilton, Whitney. There's a little bit of North Austin, I think, is in your district. Is that right?
We go from East Austin to Central Austin to North Austin over to West Austin. I mean, it is so carved up. We actually have UT proper, University of Texas, is in our district, but not the apartments associated with the West Campus side of district, which is just where most UT students live in West Campus, although we have a very large dormitory on campus, several dormitories, but one of them is very large, as there are probably 4,000 students that actually live on campus. So it's, we even have Southwest Austin in our district. So yes, okay. It is true to say a bit of North Austin. That is true, but a bit of East and Central and West and South. So.
Okay. So, so you've been driving up and down that district for the last year or more. Yeah, so let's talk about Roger Williams and some of his issues, right? So I did mention he's worth, close to $30 million or something like that. He is one of the, sort of most corrupt members in the House, right? Can you talk about, and we don't have to get into great depth, but he had in 2016 he had an ethics investigation, which the House they found he had violated ethics, right?
They
But
did, and then they quietly
nothing happened.
dismissed it. They quietly
Yes.
dismissed it.
So what's the story there in a nutshell?
So this is actually honestly a heartbreaking story. There were two sisters who had rented a vehicle. It was under an active safety recall. Due to a malfunction in the car, it crashed and both sisters were killed. So their mother, in their memory, wanted to have legislation passed saying that no cars could be rented out or loaned out if they were under an active safety recall. And it passed. And Roger Williams, the guy I'm running against, who has a car dealership, a very, very successful car dealership, made sure to add an amendment that would exempt car dealerships from having to comply with the law when they loan out vehicles on their lot. So if you go drop off your car for an oil change and you get a loaner vehicle, or it's under warranty and you get a loaner vehicle, those cars, if they are under active safety recall, do not have to comply with this federal legislation. And yes, he was under an active safety. He was under an ethics investigation because it definitely benefited his dealership. And his excuse is, no, I'm just representing all dealerships.
Right.
And then the Republicans quietly, it was the beginning of hey, let's just sweep this under the rug and not actually do anything about it. Yeah.
Is that story widely known within the district?
I don't think it's widely known within the district. A few people definitely know about it. It was never picked up by anything other than major news outlets. But in rural Texas, and we have we have Travis County where Austin is, and a lot of rural Texas as you make your way up north to almost Fort Worth. And in these smaller towns, I will say it is challenging to get a negative story about Roger, as true as they may be. It is very, very negative or it's very challenging to get them to cover Roger Williams in a negative light. And so even with the most recent scandal he's embroiled with, which is taking PPP, the Payroll Protection Program under the CARES Act, for his car dealership outside of the district, and then voting against the transparency bill, coincidentally called the Truth Act. He voted against the Truth Act that would have required him to disclose how much he took and if any of his family members benefited from it. And the only reason we found out is one of the newspapers in Dallas broke the story, but he refused to disclose how much he took. And then about a little over a week ago, the Small Business Administration released that he took between $1 and $2 million for his car dealership.
Right. Wow. Yeah. So if you were a voter that chanted "Drain the swamp" in 2016, this is a swamp creature right here that you need to displace. I want to talk a little bit about what you're fighting for. So I'm going to pull up a slide here. We talked a little bit about Medicare for all. Can you talk about like Green New Deal, but tie it to Texas as like a clean energy leader?
I would love to. Oh my goodness. Texas has been an energy leader, for over 100 years, but in the realm of fossil fuel energy. And what I would love to see is us transition away from fossil fuels to clean energy, wind and solar, and still remain the leader in the United States. And I have an economic plan for the Fort Hood area. So Fort Hood, which is the largest military installation in the United States, even Fort Hood is gerrymandered, and it's split between Congressional District 25 and one to the east of 25, which is District 31. But can you imagine redeploying men and women who have been fighting the forever war for oil and redeploying them to a green energy economy here in Texas? We have so much sunshine here in Texas and so much land. And the men and women who come out of Fort Hood have incredible mechanical and engineering skills. And if they want to stay in that area, if they want to retire to the towns around Fort Hood, they typically either have to go into retail or the service industries. And what I envision, along with people who are running at the state level and people who are running at the local level, is creating a green energy economy that radiates out of the Fort Hood area, and truly weaning our dependence off of foreign oil so our men and women don't have to fight and die overseas for this oil.
Awesome. Yeah, imagine the military budget didn't go to killing civilians in other countries, but rather, buttressing our energy, here.
Yeah.
How about while we're on the topic, you would obviously end the fossil fuel subsidies, which are.
Oh, yes. Oh, my goodness. So, in raw dollars, we spend billions and billions of dollars on fossil fuel subsidies. But if you're talking about the total cost of what we subsidize, including the environmental effects, the health effects of the fossil fuel industry, it's about $650 billion that we Americans subsidize. This is just what America subsidizes. This isn't the rest of the world. And yes, I would love to see us reallocate, especially tax subsidies, away from the fossil fuel industry into the green energy industry and the retrofitting industry, and to lure that innovation. And I will digress for just a moment to put a plug in for Medicare for All. Imagine how much innovation has been lost because we've kept people tethered to jobs that had health insurance. And we know we have to address climate change in a very aggressive way, in a very innovative way. This is a way to unlock that innovation and the potential by freeing up people from jobs that have insurance and letting them go open their own companies, start their new things, and let's get tackle climate change head on and provide healthcare at the same time.
Right on. Amazing. Are there fossil fuel companies? I know Texas is obviously a huge fossil fuel state. When you approach this topic with constituents, I'm assuming you have to, lean in on communicating the just transition. Can you talk about a just transition?
We do. We absolutely have to have a just transition. We have a lot of refineries in the Houston area. And while Houston is not in my district, obviously we don't want to leave the workers in the fossil fuel industry high and dry. So it would include a just transition, but there are a lot of opportunities to transition those employees into the renewable sector, including building windmills along our coastline here in Texas. And instead of working on pipelines, we'll be working on something that is above ground, a large metal object called a windmill. And but there are so many opportunities to create this just transition for the workers so that we do not leave them behind.
Right on. Yeah, windmills don't they don't spill, they don't leak, they don't they survive floods. Let's talk about immigration, and I think I saw in one of your interviews that you did visit one of the concentration camps. Can you talk about that experience and what you saw, and how that would motivate you policy-wise in terms of immigration?
2 years ago in June, they erected the very first, what they called it, a tent city. Talk about a euphemism. It was a concentration camp for teenagers here in Texas at the border. It was called Tornillo. And what has been so incredibly challenging about this entire thing is the separation of families. Parents from children, grandparents from grandkids, or even aunts and uncles from their nephews and nieces. And to think that not only do we separate families, but then we take children and put them in the equivalent of a concentration camp. Now, I don't know if y'all know how hot Texas gets in June and July, but we're easily in the triple digits in the summertime. So easily hovering around 100, 101 every day. That's our summer. And to put people, and especially children, in such inhumane environments, I cannot imagine anything crueler than what we have done with respect to immigration over these last 3 years. It is a stain on our country's conscience. And my hope is that we can hold those accountable, criminally accountable, who have implemented these shameful horrific, traumatic policies over the last 3 years. And I really do mean that, criminally liable.
Yeah. Yeah. Are there any other issues regarding immigration that you want to talk about? I think I saw the breakdown of your district is about 20% Hispanic. I'm assuming there's a big immigrant community there.
There is. And in fact, I've had, I would say the privilege, but it's also been incredibly sad, gut-wrenching, meeting families who came here under temporary protected status orders and made lives here, had families here, had children here, children who are citizens, and were given their final year to stay, like a 1-year permit, and told to leave, go back to the country that they came from. And the pain and the sorrow that is in these families' lives, and they still have young children. I mean, you're not talking about, some of these families have been here for 19 years, but if you've been here for 19 years, you can easily have children, who are in their early teens, right around adolescent age. And the confusion that the kids feel, the hurt that they feel, the numbness that they feel, and then we want them to, be okay and like go to school, like as if everything is okay. Everything's not okay. This is probably the thing that makes me as a mom really incredibly angry, but also incredibly sad. And Texas has a very rich history. We are interwoven. It was Tejas before it was Texas. And our culture is incredibly intertwined with our neighbors to the south. And it was not long ago when we allowed people to come here and work, and people could freely pass the border, come work, and then go back home. And a lot of people who are coming from even south of Mexico are coming from conditions that we, the United States, created in their countries, and we've made their countries unlivable. So they are fleeing horrific circumstances for that opportunity that America presents to them. And I even recently went to one of the encampments on the Mexican side of the border. I did this earlier this year for people who are waiting to get a hearing date to come in. Right. And I asked one of the fathers, what would you want Americans to know? And he said, I want them to know that we are family men, that we own businesses. We owned businesses where we came from. Some of us were farmers. We are not what your president says we are. Mm-hmm. And we still see the hope in your country.
Wow. Yeah, that's the first line of assault, is dehumanizing them. So that's why, thanks for sharing that. So one of the other questions is, obviously, we're sort of past the primary and you're in the general, going against a Republican. You have endorsements from the sort of some big names on the progressive side, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Julian Castro. How is the party, if you will, getting behind you? They tend to not favor progressives over corporate Democrats, but in this situation, what are they doing?
Nothing, as far as I can tell. I would share a story with you, but it's probably not for consumption at this point. But no, I can't. Not at this point. They are doing nothing. And honestly, look, we don't take PAC money. No PAC money, even from traditionally Democratic funding sources. So we couldn't take party money.
Right.
We made a commitment to not do it. And I believe it's if we really want to see campaign finance reform in America, we have to lead by example. And, look, I don't know what you would call it, churn and burn on some level. You raise money for consultants to do whatever it is that they do. And that's, it's just almost at some point a contest between who raises more money. And what that does is it really, it tells people that there are certain people who shouldn't run. And what I mean by that is, if you don't have a donor base before you decide to run, don't consider running with, party backing. And I think that's a terrible thing, because we need more teachers in office. I'm thrilled that Jamal Bowman's race was finally called by the AP. We need more nurses in office. We need more people of color in office. We need more people who are in the LGBTQ community in office. And for a lot of people, if you don't have the money, that's the first step that says, like, I can't run because I don't have money. And it shouldn't be that way. We should be a country that allows people to run and represent the communities that they are elected to serve. And if you're dialing for dollars all day long with donors, there's a big chunk of time that you're not spending serving your constituents.
Yeah. Yeah. And in another interview, I heard you use a term that I thought was just really poignant and powerful. And, back to the point of, you talk about the family you met across the border, and, you're coming from this compassionate place of, like I say, seeking justice, public service. And you talked about diversity there. And I heard in another interview, you said, you would govern from a place from the heart of a mother, right? Yeah. Which is, boy, if that doesn't, who would be opposed to that versus, heart of corruption? Like, it's not even a contest. I can't understand how someone, couldn't get that.
I think that too. I mean, moms look at things, and I think about the huge shifts in society that moms have been leading. And I think about Black Lives Matter was started by moms. Mothers Against Drunk Driving started by moms. Moms Demand Action started, to address gun violence in America. There are these incredible movements in our country that have been started by mothers. We do think about things very differently, and we definitely think about the future for our kids and their kids. And that future needs to be a livable planet, education where they don't come out of college saddled with the equivalent of a mortgage, and it includes healthcare. And, to get normal, everyday people, working class people in office, we need campaign finance reform. I would like to use the tax code to address it. I would absolutely be in favor of a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United. I'm proud to have in Citizens United endorsement. Oddly enough, they're a PAC. We don't take their money either. But I'm proud to have their endorsement because I know they really want campaign finance reform. But why not tax corporate PACs and tax them onerously? Corporate PACs are tax-exempt entities. Let's revoke that tax-exempt status, tax them 70 to 90%, and let's create a revenue stream from that tax money that could actually fund publicly financed campaigns so that moms can run, teachers can run, nurses can run, small business owners, if they choose, they could run. And, it doesn't have to be rich old white men who are running all the time.
Yeah, who basically earn their seat by being a successful fundraiser, right? Yeah. Imagine such a thing. So how can people get involved? How can people help? I'm assuming you have a robust calling, text outreach. How can people volunteer?
Yes, we do. In fact, somebody just sent me the stats that in 3 months' time, over these last 3 months, I think we've made 43,000 calls, sent 78,000 texts. So yes, we would love volunteers. You can get involved going to julieoliver.org. Somebody bought julieoliver.com. julieoliver.org/volunteer and get signed up. And if calling is not, where your best gifts and talents are, we'll find a place for you. I mean, I have one of the best, seriously, the best team. We have these fun data parties. So if you like to do data entry on a, Zoom call with other people with fun music in the background, the person who hosts them always has a theme. She's amazing. We will find a place for you in our campaign, and we would be honored to have your support of your time and your treasure and your talent.
Right on. How about, so the election is November 3rd, right?
Yep.
How about any chance of a debate?
I am hopeful for a debate. I would love nothing more. But Roger Williams has still not acknowledged that I exist, other than the day after he won in 2018, when we shaved that 21-point margin down to single digits. He wrote that the election was a swift repudiation of socialism. And that is about as close as he has gotten to naming or acknowledging he had a challenger ever. And since then, he's been ignoring me. So I wouldn't hold my breath for it.
Yeah. But that is another thing that people can do. Not that it necessarily warrants results, but call his office. Pester him, send him emails, demand a debate. Right? That's
Demand a debate. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
But
We
yeah, you'll
ask people to ask him that. I would love to have a debate, and it can, be honestly on his terms. I'm okay with that.
right on.
It can be a
Yeah,
Zoom call. So,
it
but I
could
would
be
love
in his house, out of the district where
yeah,
he
in
lives.
his house out of his district.
Cool. Well, Julie, there's. I've been saying this to a lot of the progressive candidates that I had on lately. We've had a couple of gut punches lately, right, with Bernie and Booker, right? But there
Yeah.
still are races that we can get legitimate servants of the public, running on principle, running uncorrupt, like Julie. So get involved. We got, we're kind of in the home stretch on your campaign here, but certainly time to get involved, donate, make some calls, join some of those texting parties and whatnot. Sounds like an awesome time, and I would love to have you back on before the election day and do what I can to keep getting the message out there. So,
Oh,
um,
thank you.
yeah, and
Thank
thank you for and I will say thank you for running in 2018, and thank you for running again. I think uh, name recognition goes a long way, and I'm sure you had a bit of momentum, and you could have. I'm sure 2018 was exhausting in a bunch of ways, and you could have easily stepped back out. But the fact that you stuck in there for another run is again a testament to your motivation. So thank you for
Well,
that.
thank you. Thank you for your encouraging words. We have to finish the job. Too much is at stake right now. So we have to finish what we started.
Right on. Cool. So thank you, Julie, and I will talk to you again before November.
Thank you.